globalist tyranny. England has over 70% of its laws made by unelected bureaucrats. Now the bureaucrats are saying to Europe, you're going to give up whatever rights you had and give it to us through the fraud the banksters have induced. But something happened. James Cameron, who said he won't let the British people or the people of the UK vote on getting out of the euro, he's now suddenly voting on euro power grab. So what's happening, Lord Monckton?
Very, very interesting. This is the influence of the United Kingdom Independence Party, because 83 of David Cameron's backbenchers rebelled against him in a vote on Europe a few weeks ago in the House of Commons. And he began to realize that he is out of touch with his party on this issue, and that if he stayed out of touch with it until the next election, and UKIP is still there standing against him, then we will take enough votes from his right wing, if you like, to make sure that he cannot ever win a general election with an overall majority. He couldn't do it last time because we took enough votes away from him. The same will happen, still more so this time, now that everybody can see that the European project has dismally and abjectly failed. And so he is beginning to run scared. And when Angela Merkel and Nicolas Sarkozy of Germany and France, respectively, were absolutely intransigent in the negotiations and wouldn't make any concessions at all to him, even though Britain isn't even in the euro and should not, therefore, be asked to submit its own budgets for approval by these unelected commissars, he finally realized that if he wanted to stay as leader of the Conservative Party, he was going to have to raise his game on the European question. And so he voted against the entire new treaty that we're going to bring in to allow the EU commissars to put their sticky fingers all over our national budgets. They can't do that because he has vetoed it. One veto prevents any of these changes from happening, and he, for once, found the guts to do this. And it was a very good thing. And of course, you can imagine how the mainstream press treated it here. They said that we had isolated ourselves from Europe. Well, of course, no, it's the other way round. Europe has isolated itself from us by setting up essentially a fraudulent currency, which has now about the value of monopoly money or Mickey Mouse money. And it has failed. And so David Cameron has realized he now needs to keep Britain out of any more expenditure on this nonsense. It's going to be very, very expensive putting the European Union's finances right.
Well, this is key, Lord Monckton.
Will not be required to pay for it.
All right, stay there. We're going to come back with 5 more minutes with you. And I know you wouldn't say that you have a date when Greece is going to basically default and all this if you didn't. Incredible information. I briefly want to ask you about Ron Paul, but Lord Monckton is our guest. And if you want to visit his website, it's excellent. Send it to your friends that are under globalist brainwashing and want to pay indulgences to Al Gore. Scienceandpublicpolicy.org. Well, he is a frontline fighter and the most prolific, exposing the globalist collectivist authoritarians. He's Lord Christopher Monckton. Only got 5 minutes left with him. Finishing up on Europe, if there was ever any doubt for anyone that it was authoritarian out of control, when they make proclamations of, you will waive all remaining sovereignty to us. EU bureaucratic police will physically seize money to pay it. We will put all new environmental controls in, shutting down everything. I mean, just, and Von Rumpe looking all crazy, saying, global governance, global governance. I mean, it's so obvious what they're doing. And then run by the mega banks that have engaged in all the fraud, waging war against all the other free market banks and brokerage firms, trying to take them over. I mean, here's the proof of the authoritarianism, Lord Monckton.
Well, what they're doing is they are indeed trying to take democracy away forever. The governing class in Europe, and to a large extent in America, has got tired of having to face re-election.
Lord Monckton's Skype, we just lost it now. It was key information he was covering. We've got to get him reconnected. I may have to come back after the break and get Heidelberg on it 15 after or something, because this is too important. Yeah, that's it. I mean, look, they're saying they're going to censor the internet. The government and the media are getting together because the dominant dinosaur media is dying. It's a perfect storm. They're talking about secret arrests. They're talking about grabbing American citizens. The manuals aren't about al-Qaeda. It's all about American citizens and global warming skeptics. And as Lord Monckton said, they're getting tired of standing for election. And I want him to be able to finish that point because it is so important. Every generation ends up facing some form of tyranny. And what we're facing is very nasty. But it isn't a Mussolini or a Stalin running around in a clown outfit. It is, and we know what that looks like a Charlie Chaplin movie when he made fun of them. Now these are people in suits all creeping around in a bureaucratic way, beavering away like termites, as Lord Monckton would say. And we lost him on the Skype there. And again, I'm wound up, ladies and gentlemen. You've got to get wound up about this. You've got to get out of your morass. And we are doing that. That's why before they thought they could just barrel through with all this regardless. But now they were going to let the free press, the alternative press, still be there because they thought, well, nobody listens to them. Nobody listens to Ron Paul. Nobody listens to Alex Jones. Now, because they realize that we are supplanting them exponentially, they've lost some of the arrogance and the hubris. 5 years ago, I'd say, man, I hope they continue with this hubris because we're really making inroads against these people. And they're really arrogant up there and don't understand it. Now they still kind of got the arrogance, but they're concerned, and they think, well, we'll just crush them. And Lord Monckton, I'm sorry your Skype cut out. Finishing up with the where you left off of they don't want to stand for re-election.
No, that's right. They would like to just be in power forever, and that's what the transfer of government away by treaty from elected hands in your Congress to unelected hands at the UN means. And so what you have to start doing is preparing your friends in Congress to vote against any treaty that comes out of Rio de Janeiro or Qatar later in the year. This biodiversity thing is just another excuse for a power grab by the usual suspects, and Congress must not ratify any such treaty. Get onto your senator now and say, look, enough is enough. They got the global warming thing wrong. Now they're going to get the sustainable development and biodiversity thing wrong as well. There's no scientific basis for giving up our democracy. It is time for all this nonsense to stop.
Okay, I know you're very busy, sir, but since we lost a few minutes with you, I'd like to briefly go to break and come back for a few more minutes and finish up with exactly what they're doing in Europe, what this, as you said a week and a half ago, they're just going to announce total power grab, like, in response to being exposed, fleeing forward, and then briefly Ron Paul and the different tactics they're using to try to block people from voting for him. I want to get your view on that. Straight ahead, then Hoppy Heidelberg coming up. All right, we are 8 minutes into hour number 2. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, the former head of the federal grand jury in Oklahoma City, Hoppy Heidelberg, who saw the evidence that it was a Clintonista inside job, will be joining us via video connection from Oklahoma City. And we're going to have a series of other witnesses like Jane Graham on and others in the coming weeks because the new film, A Noble Lie, is out, the first official, well-produced eyewitness film that's come out since the tragic events. And you see the establishment gearing up to blame domestic groups for a new event. That is what the globalists are going to try, undoubtedly. So we've got to expose this paradigm right now. Now, I've got a big news blitz coming up in 5 minutes because I spent most of the first 30 minutes on Ron Paul. We're going to get Lord Monckton's take on that because he's been at the highest levels of the British government and also run for election in Scotland, had them try similar things. But finishing up with the point that you were making about Europe is trying to go authoritarian. They don't even deny that on Bloomberg TV. They say, well, they have to do it to fix things, and they're going to get rid of sovereignty. And basically, where others failed to conquer Europe, the mega banks have done it. And the bureaucracy now rules. And it looks like Von Rumpi and others are still quite arrogant, even as things implode underneath them, Lord Monckton.
Well, yes, they're taking full advantage of this by saying, well, of course, the only reason why this happened is that we didn't have enough power. And, of course, it happened because they already had too much power, but they're just twisting it and turning it round. So it's the same story in Europe with the euro as it is with the UN and the climate. These are a concerted effort. Indeed, the EU's advisors are telling the UN how to draft its biodiversity treaty in such a way that it takes advantage of all the tricks the EU has learned. For instance, you can put the treaty into place and then it self-amends without having to get the assent of all the parties. It means you start with the stub of a treaty, and then the bureaucrats can make up anything they want from then on. They have absolute power. They've done this in Europe, and they're planning to do it with this biodiversity treaty as well. And the only way to stop it is not to ratify it in the first place. And the United States has got to be very clear about this. This will be profoundly, deeply damaging to the West in general and to the United States in particular, the great Satan. These are the people who want to destroy the United States. They're using the UN as the weapon to do it. And the United States, I mean, at least half of the United States, unfortunately, is a party which is perfectly happy to go along with this final destruction of everything that your founding fathers wanted to set up. You must resist.
And it's so draconian. I mean, they're openly in our newspapers saying it's for the earth. Your power prices will now double in the next 2 years. And they say it with a straight face. And meanwhile, all the jobs are moving to Mexico and China because we can't even have power to run factories. And they just giggle at us. And the same bureaucrats then own shares in the factories in China. And it's like a sacrament to destroy your country.
That's right. It's a truly horrifying picture. And the real worry that I have is that the two leading contenders at the moment for the Republican nomination are deeply unsound on this whole global warming and environmental question. You've got Newt Gingrich, who's been a sort of closet greenie in and out of the closet for years. He sat on that settee with, what's her name, Pelosi, to talk about global warming enthusiastically. And then you have Mitt Romney, who's even worse. I mean, these two are totally unfit to hold office because they don't see what it is that the UN and its various friends among the Democrats are planning to do to America. And they're not going to defend America and its Constitution against this dangerous onslaught from the people who are trying to bring the West down forever and impose a global communist or fascist dictatorship. It doesn't matter what kind of label. It's totalitarian either way. And again, as we often say, Alex, people listening in may think, isn't this all terribly extreme, what they're saying? Yes, it is, because that's what's actually going to happen. We've already seen it in Europe. Britain is no longer a democracy. Oh, we have all the trappings. We have an election every 5 years. Doesn't make any difference, because 5/6 of our laws, 83% of our laws, according to official German estimates, are made for us by the unelected commissars, the bureaucrats of the European Union.
Lord Monckton,
that is what's going to happen to America, too, once the UN gets this biodiversity treaty through. So Rio must not succeed.
Well, they're definitely on the defensive right now, but as you said, they just metastasize into something new. But looking at this, it's similar to what we have here, where the EPA just does whatever it wants outside of law and has now announced that under the rubric of biodiversity, they can do anything. And you know, you're saying Gingrich and others are just ignorant. And I know you're being polite.
Well, I mean, Gingrich and Romney go along with this garbage, unfortunately.
Well, they're fully conscious of it. They understand. I mean, I'm saying you're...
That's right. And so, unfortunately, I mean, in many ways, I rather like Newt Gingrich. I know him quite well. I see him quite